Welcome to Hiraeth, the home of modern Welsh politics.
Not like that. It is Matt here, recording another solo pod on another momentous day in Welsh political history. It's felt like a question of when, not if, for some time, but Vaughan Gething has announced his intention to resign as First Minister and leader of Welsh Labour. Dogged by questions over donations to his leadership campaign and the inability to satisfy critics that he had sufficient evidence to sack Hannah Blythen from government, the pressure has continued to mount, until today, where eventually, following the resignation of 4 of his cabinet, Vaughan was forced to announce his eventual resignation. The conversation will now inevitably turn to questions of his successor and the timetable for their election. But first, let's go back in time a little bit. 6 weeks ago, Vaughan Gething lost a motion of no confidence in his leadership in the Senedd. That vote was not binding, but it caused an unbelievable amount of a political headache for Vaughan in the weeks that followed. Following the vote, it became quite clear that Vaughan and the Welsh Government would struggle to pass its budget next year, so long as Vaughan was leader. Jane Dodds and Plaid Cymru said as much. They said they would consider backing a budget if there was a different First Minister in place. Now, this would be an almost insurmountable issue for any politician, but this was in the build-up to the general election. And the general election was both good and bad for Vaughan in many ways. The Labour Party's single-mindedness to win the general election and its emphasis on party unity did to some extent save him and prolong his leadership, but it also ramped up the politicisation of what had occurred. More scrutiny and more focus placed on his actions, both during his leadership campaign and in his time as First Minister. Skip forward a few weeks to last week, where the Welsh Labour group had an away day and a group meeting. Now, this has been widely reported as being quite a fiery meeting. In fact, one person said to me it had been bloody. There are rumours during that meeting that Vaughan had been asked to resign, and that if he didn't resign, others would have to. Yesterday, Jeremy Miles, the now former Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Energy and Welsh Language, was asked by ITV 4 times whether he backed the leadership of Vaughan Gething, and 4 times he was unable to answer. Now, for many, this was an indictment of Vaughan's leadership, the fact that one of his most senior cabinet members and the person whom he had defeated only a few months ago in order to become Welsh Labour leader and First Minister was refusing to back him. But for others, it became clear that something was afoot. This was buttressed somewhat by Julie James's resignation letter. We'll discuss that a little bit more in a moment, but I'd like to highlight just one line from it, which goes some way to explaining that something may have been happening. In the very first line, Julie James says, "Dear Vaughan, following my text to you of yesterday, I am very sorry not to have heard from you. As I said in that message yesterday, it is with a heavy heart that I am sending you this letter." As such, it looks pretty clear that when Jeremy Miles refused to answer a question of confidence in Vaughan Gething, that whilst it may not have been collusion between the 4 parties, people were very much aware that letters of resignation were going to be landing today. And land they did. First to offer his resignation was Mick Antoniv, the Counsel General. In his letter he said, "Over the past week and longer, we have had a number of conversations about the challenges you have faced as First Minister and leader of Welsh Labour. As Counsel General, as a friend and comrade, and as a member of the Welsh Government, I feel it is necessary for me to give you advice that you need to receive, no matter how painful. I must advise you that I do not believe you can continue as First Minister. Wales needs confident and stable government. I do not believe you are capable of delivering that. You have lost a vote of confidence in the Senedd. That is something I regard as being of major constitutional importance. It is clear that you no longer command a majority, that you will be unable to enter into the agreements necessary to pass a budget, and for all intents and purposes, the Senedd is rudderless." Next to resign was Julie James, the now former Cabinet Secretary for Housing, Local Government and Planning. I read you a little bit of her letter previously, but I'll read a bit more of a substantive point now. The last few months have seemed to me to be a real roller coaster. On the one hand, serious pride in your truly historic election, of agreeing to serve in your government and being determined to do my very best in that role, and the great UK election result. On the other hand, the serious issues of your campaign donations, the real mistakes in the handling of those and other issues, which led up to your loss in the confidence vote in the Senedd, and the continuing and seemingly never-ending series of related issues that have followed. In these circumstances, I see no way to agreeing a budget, nor how we can achieve our legislative ambitions. Next to resign was Lesley Griffiths, the now former Cabinet Secretary for Culture and Social Justice. In her letter she said, "Yesterday we discussed my concerns about the circumstances surrounding certain campaign donations you received, the outcome of the vote of no confidence, and the sacking of a ministerial colleague for leaking when no formal leak inquiry had taken place. In addition, I find it deeply distressing, from both personal and professional perspectives, to see the negative impact all of this has had on relationships between long-standing colleagues and, in many cases, close friends. Relationships have fractured and will require goodwill and strong leaderships to repair. These unfortunate and deeply saddening events have together impacted significantly on your ability to continue to deliver for the people of Wales. I am sure all of this must be weighing heavily on you and your family too. Following our discussions yesterday, and after further careful consideration, I have reached the conclusion that we will simply not be able to put things back on track under your leadership. Finally, Jeremy Miles resigned as Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Energy and Welsh Language." In his letter he said, "The events of the last few months, including your loss of the confidence vote in the Senedd, have been incredibly painful. This has become a distraction from the important work of the Welsh Government and is damaging our party. I am sure this period has taken an unimaginable toll on you and your family. It certainly has for the Senedd Labour Group and for many in Welsh Labour. We cannot continue like this. It is essential that we begin to repair the damage immediately, and I have reached the conclusion very regrettably that this cannot happen under your leadership. I can't see any way forward for us which allows us to get on with the job we are elected to do without you standing down." What came next was a ministerial statement from Vaughan Gething. But not right away was it his resignation statement. Many people had been demanding for weeks to see the full and unredacted messages that formed the evidence base upon which Vaughan Gething made the decision to sack Hannah Blythen. And this morning, Vaughan released those messages. I won't go into full details about what was in those messages. They're available on the Welsh Government's website, and I'm sure we can link to them in the show notes. But many have considered this a bit of a mic drop from Vaughan, given that he probably by this point knew he was going to resign, and emphasising the fact that Julie James, the person who had resigned just moments before from his cabinet, had stated that she agreed with Vaughan's decision in deleting the messages, which had been subject of much inquiry following their leaking to nation.cymru. Shortly after, Vaughan issued the following statement. "I have this morning taken the difficult decision to begin the process of stepping down as leader of the Welsh Labour Party, and as a result, First Minister. Having been elected as leader of my party in March, I had hoped that over the summer a period of reflection, rebuilding and renewal could take place under my leadership. I recognise now that this is not possible. It has been the honour of my life to do this job even for a few short months, to see the dedication to public service from our civil service and the dedication to civility from the Welsh public." He continued, "In 11 years as a minister, I have never ever made a decision for personal gain. I have never ever misused or abused ministerial responsibilities. My integrity matters. I have not compromised it." Well, what happens now? Eventually Vaughan will tender his resignation as First Minister and as the leader of Welsh Labour. But there's a lot of process between then and now. So what's the process for electing a Welsh Labour leader? Well, there's a couple of ways to get on the ballot, but that's the first thing you've got to do. If you want to stand to be Welsh Labour leader, you have to be a member of the Senedd. You have to receive a supporting nomination from either 6 members of the Labour group or 3 members of the Labour group plus 20% of constituency Labour parties, or 3 members of the Senedd group plus 3 affiliates, 2 of which must be trade unions. This week, at some point, The Welsh Executive Committee of the Labour Party will meet, as will the Procedure Committee of the Welsh Labour Party. They will determine the rules for the contest, as well as the timeline. Now, this morning, many were expecting this contest to be wrapped up before the end of the summer. But, in true Labour Party fashion, we don't tend to have meetings in August, due to people being away on holiday, the school holidays, etc. So any nomination meetings for the CLPs, see where this is starting to come in, if people need to get on the ballot, would have to take place in September. You would have to give people around a month, 2 months in which to organise these nomination meetings themselves with very strict rules on how valid nominations can be made. You'll also have to give the opportunity to the affiliates to meet and consider who they would wish to nominate in order to get someone on the ballot, should that be required. So for those expecting a quick conclusion to the Labour leadership election, or expecting us to have a new First Minister within days, you may be waiting some time. Now, many people have asked me today whether I think a contest will occur, or whether one candidate will be picked by the Senedd group and coronated as the new leader of Welsh Labour, and then eventually the new First Minister. I can see both sides of this argument. Some people feel as though one candidate picked by the majority of the Senedd group will create unity. It has been a very divided group for some weeks now, and they just want to get back on with the job of governing Wales. However, if the experience of people like Rishi Sunak are anything to go by, just because you've been crowned leader of your party does not necessarily mean you command the support of that group. As such, it is my view that a fresh mandate is required. The Senedd group should narrow it down to a certain number of candidates, and then Welsh Labour members and the members of the wider Labour movement in Wales should decide the next leader of Welsh Labour. It would provide the candidates ample opportunity to set out their platform, to move away from the last few months of indecision and inaction, and provide a clear policy platform and agenda with which the Welsh Government can move forward. There will be many people who disagree with me, but I think that a contest is now inevitable. And who will be in that contest, I hear you ask? Well, the obvious frontrunner is Jeremy Miles, the man who lost to Vaughan Gething by a very small number of votes just 4 months ago. Many are saying that it is his to lose, but there are others saying that he would not be the right person to heal a divided Labour group and a divided Labour Party. There are many people who backed Vaughan Gething just a few short months ago who would struggle to accept the leadership of Jeremy Miles. And if it's not Jeremy Miles, who else could it be? Now, Hugh Aranka-Davies did not resign this morning. He is still the Cabinet Secretary for Climate Change and Rural Affairs, and many are touting him as a possible unity candidate, someone that could bring the party back together and the Labour group back together, someone who previously backed Jeremy Miles but has served diligently in the cabinet of Vaughan Gething. A third candidate being touted by many is the current Cabinet Secretary for Health, Eluned Morgan, someone who stood in the 2018 Welsh Labour leadership election, coming third. Many have questioned whether she would like to stand again. There will be an awful lot of pressure upon the Labour Senedd group to ensure that this is not a male-only election campaign for the second time in a row. For a party that is meant to be the party of equality, it will be very difficult if there is another Labour leadership election without a woman on the ballot, and once again the Labour Party in Wales elect a man to be their leader. If Eluned decides to stand, it is very likely she will have the requisite nominations to get on the ballot paper. Who will win? Well, that is for the membership and the wider Labour movement to decide, but it will for certain be an interesting contest. Let's step away, though, for a second from the real politic of it all. Politics at the professional level is a blood sport, a business that far too often forgets the human beings behind the rumour and conjecture. Many will pay tributes to the impact that this will have had on Vaughan his family and those around him, and I would like to add my voice to those. Anyone with the bravery to stand for public office deserves much more respect and compassion than our news cycle allows. Also, as an ex-political staffer myself, it would be remiss of me not to mention the political staff that will now be caught up in this. The special advisers whose contracts are tied to the tenure of the First Minister are now cast into a period of uncertainty and will be spending tonight worried for their jobs, their livelihoods and their futures, and they too deserve our compassion and our thoughts at this time. Welsh Labour's problems run much deeper than Vaughan Gething, and with the election of a changed government in Westminster, it too must enter a period of renewal if it is to be the largest party in the next Senedd and to lead Wales to a prosperous future. Whoever wins this contest, whoever forms the next government, we must all back them to succeed. Even if you do not vote for them or their party, their successes will be our successes and their failures felt by many across Wales. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed what you've heard this evening, please don't forget to find Hiraeth on all the socials at HiraethPod. You can go to our website www.walespolitics.com, and thank you so much for supporting us with your ears. But if you would like to do so with your wallet, you can go to www.patreon.com/HiraethPod.
Thank you for listening to Hiraeth. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.